People who overthink everything are often misunderstood. From the outside, it looks like anxiety, indecision, or a tendency to complicate things unnecessarily. From the inside, it feels more like responsibility, like caution, like an effort to avoid repeating something that once had consequences you weren't prepared for. Overthinking usually begins after a specific type of experience, not general stress, but unpredictability. A moment when someone changed without warning, a situation that escalated faster than expected, an emotional shift that left you exposed, blamed, or confused. What lingers isn't just what happened, but the realization that you didn't see it coming. That realization quietly alters how you relate to the world. You start paying closer attention, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. Tone matters more. Timing matters more. Small inconsistencies stand out. You become aware of things other people seem comfortable ignoring. This isn't because you enjoy analysis, but because your mind learned that missing certain details can leave you vulnerable. For many overthinkers, this pattern forms early. It often develops in environments where emotional stability was inconsistent, where explanations didn't match reactions, or where safety depended on accurately reading the people around you. In those situations, awareness becomes a form of protection. You learn to monitor before you trust, because trust without understanding feels risky. As an adult, this shows up in ways that are easy to mislabel. You replay conversations, not because you're obsessive, but because you're checking whether something was off. You hesitate before making decisions, not because you lack confidence, but because you're aware that outcomes aren't always straightforward. You prepare for reactions ahead of time, because being surprised once taught you how costly that can be. The fear underneath all of this isn't fear of failure or rejection. It's the fear of misjudging reality. The fear that your understanding of a situation might be incomplete, and that the missing piece will matter later. The fear that calm moments can be misleading, and that trusting too quickly is something you'll have to pay for afterward. This fear doesn't make you dramatic or unstable. It makes you alert. But alertness that never switches off eventually becomes exhausting. Your mind stays active even when nothing is objectively wrong, because your system learned that nothing is wrong isn't always accurate. Over time, this constant vigilance changes how everyday life feels. Neutral situations carry weight. Silence feels ambiguous instead of peaceful. Good moments don't always register as safe, because your past taught you that safety can disappear without notice. You might look composed on the outside while internally you're evaluating, adjusting, and preparing. There's also a quiet self-doubt that often accompanies this pattern. You may question your own judgment, even when it's reasonable. You may look back on past decisions and criticize yourself for not anticipating every outcome. The underlying assumption is that if you had thought harder, you could have prevented what happened. That assumption keeps the cycle going. The more responsibility you place on your perception, the more pressure you feel to get everything right. Overthinking becomes a way of trying to earn safety through accuracy. If you analyze enough, anticipate enough, and prepare enough, maybe nothing will catch you off guard again. What's important to recognize is that this pattern didn't come from weakness. It came from adaptation. Your mind learned to stay ahead because staying ahead once reduced harm. The problem isn't that you think too much. It's that your nervous system still believes that thinking ahead is the only way to stay protected. This is the foundation of overthinking. Not excess thought, but a learned relationship with uncertainty. One shaped by experiences where being wrong about people, situations, or emotional signals came at a cost you remember clearly. even if you rarely talk about it. Living this way slowly reshapes how everything feels. Decisions begin to carry more weight than they objectively deserve. Relationships require constant mental calibration. Even neutral moments come with a background tension, as if relaxing would mean missing something important. Many overthinkers believe their problem is the mind itself. They assume that if they could just quiet their thoughts, life would finally feel manageable. But the mind isn't malfunctioning. It's responding exactly as it was trained to respond. At some point, being unprepared led to a real consequence. It wasn't abstract. It wasn't theoretical. Something went wrong, and you learned that not seeing it coming made you vulnerable. From that moment on, alertness became a form of protection. Staying mentally active felt safer than letting your guard down. This is why calm can feel strangely uncomfortable. When nothing demands your attention, your system doesn't interpret that as peace. It interprets it as exposure. So your thoughts keep moving, not because you enjoy them, but because stillness once came at a cost. Over time, this affects how you trust yourself. You may notice that you look for reassurance even after making reasonable decisions. You might revisit past choices and judge yourself harshly for not anticipating every possible outcome. The underlying assumption is always the same. If you had thought harder, you could have prevented something painful. That assumption creates exhaustion, not the obvious kind, but a quiet, ongoing fatigue. Your mind rarely powers down. Your body stays partially tense. The present moment never fully arrives because part of you is always preparing for what might follow. What makes this especially difficult is that overthinking doesn't actually eliminate pain. It only changes how you experience it. Instead of occasional disappointment, you live with continuous vigilance. Instead of being caught off guard once in a while, you carry the pressure of anticipation every day. This leads to an important realization that many overthinkers resist. Emotional safety cannot be achieved through prediction. No amount of analysis can guarantee that people will remain consistent or that situations won't change. Life will always contain uncertainty, regardless of how carefully you think things through. The sense of safety you're looking for comes from a different place. It comes from trusting your ability to respond, not your ability to foresee. It comes from knowing that even if something shifts unexpectedly, you are capable of handling it without collapsing or losing your sense of self. This doesn't require becoming careless or dismissive of consequences. It requires letting go of the belief that every misjudgment is catastrophic. The moment that taught you to overthink already happened. You survived it, but part of you is still living as if it hasn't ended. For many people, progress begins when they stop asking whether they're missing something and start examining why missing something ever felt unforgivable. That shift changes the entire relationship you have with your thoughts. The focus moves away from control and toward understanding. You don't need to eliminate your awareness. You don't need to force optimism. You don't need to become someone who never questions their surroundings. What you need is a deeper trust in your own resilience rather than constant reliance on anticipation. You've already been through the experience that shaped this pattern. You adapted to it. You learned from it. The awareness that once protected you no longer has to dominate your life. When that understanding begins to settle emotionally, not just intellectually, something subtle changes. The mind loosens its grip. The constant monitoring softens. Moments start to feel less like threats and more like experiences. And eventually, you find yourself present without effort. Not because you've solved everything, but because you no longer believe that missing one detail will undo you. that's when overthinking starts to fade. Not because you forced it to stop, but because it no longer feels necessary.